Hi, I'm Shoma Chaudhary. Thank you for watching Inquiry. This past week has seen many milestones. The start of the Ayodhya temple construction, the first anniversary of the abrogation of 370 in Kashmir. There's much to take stock in that, but beneath that, the COVID crisis continues. India now has 40,000 deaths. There's strict, sometimes random rules of travel, lockdowns continue, and economic activity is low. In the midst of that, the Oxford vaccine trials have grabbed global headlines. Could this be the wand the world is waiting for? On Inquiry today, meet the man at the heart of it, Adar Poonawalla, CEO of the Serum Institute of India. SI is the world's largest vaccine manufacturer, and with a footprint in 167 countries, more than 70% of the world's children use their vaccines. But what's making Adar the man of the moment is that he's set to make more than 200 million COVID vaccines by the end of the year, going into manufacturing, risking millions of dollars before the clearances come. So what are the chances of success, and what's driving them to do this? To answer all of that, thank you very much for joining me, Adar.
Pleasure to be with you.
So Adar, of course, the Oxford trial is making headlines across the world, and it looks very robust. You've spoken of all the, upsides already, so I'm going to quickly enumerate it. It's shown 90% sort of a robust immune response. There's been no side effects or very mild ones. The T cell response, which is the body's capacity to fight back, looks robust. And yet there's still a phase 3 trial before this can really be declared safe and ready for, for people to take in. So what's the caveat that's left?
Yeah, let me just clarify. The phase 1 study, which is traditionally, normally always a safety study, that went off well, as you mentioned. It triggered an immune response. We don't know how much of an immune response is still required to fight the disease, and that's what the phase 3 trial will prove. All we know right now that the immune response from 90% of the patients in the trial was there, and the balance 10% also got it as soon as we gave them a second dose. And most vaccines, the traditional vaccines and the pediatric vaccines, and probably the COVID vaccines that are under development will be a 2-dose sort of regimen, because that's how you really prime and then you boost and get a better long-term immunity that we've seen for all other vaccines. It's the same with pneumonia vaccine, the measles vaccine, the pentavalent vaccines, all of that.
Right.
So that's the point. There's no caveat as such, but we just have to wait for the phase 3 to happen, because that'll really prove the efficacy.
And now I'd like to introduce Sanjay Parekh, who's a co-founder and executive vice chairman of Indegene, a technological and digital healthcare solutions company. Sanjay, you've been in this business for very long, and we just heard Adar speak about how neglected the sector is, how much scope there is, and how without the health sector, there's no other sector. So have you seen a lot of changes in the ecosystem? And how do you think all of that is going to impact the future?
Adar is absolutely right. We are woefully ill-equipped to handle the public health challenges that we have. What's ended up happening is, number one, if you think about the interactions between different stakeholders within the ecosystem, if you think of the last mile interaction, that is between the physician and the patient, that's really where healthcare gets delivered. And what's happened over the last 5 months or so is patients haven't been able to come in to see the doctor. The doctor, on the other hand, hasn't been able to go into the clinic or the hospital. More importantly, even the hospitals, clinics, nursing homes have been swamped to some extent, and as a result of which other patients, they've got squeezed out of the system. So access to healthcare has become a problem. And in a scenario like this, one of the things that has seen a huge uptick is this whole area of telehealth, teleconsultations, virtual consults, etc. Now, in the long term, will patients start going back into the clinic? Of course they will. But I think what we've seen through telemedicine is that there is a way to perhaps address some of the accessibility as well as affordability challenges that we always had as a healthcare system. And therefore, I think virtual consultation, telemedicine, etc., will be there to stay, not necessarily for the primary diagnosis, but for follow-ups, things which don't require any kind of procedural intervention, perhaps for a refill of a prescription, etc. And we are already seeing some of that in developed markets. Now, in order to be able to do that, a lot of stakeholders have had to come together. Most importantly, the payer, the insurance companies. Earlier, there used to be a lot of powwow between providers as well as the payers saying, we will not reimburse a virtual consult. COVID hit, and literally within a matter of 24 to 48 hours, payers, regulators, providers all came in line to say, we will lift all the restrictions that we have. So the message we are taking away from here is that when push comes to shove, we have the will, we have the capability of driving change. From Indegene's perspective, one of the other interactions that we've been impacting really is between pharma life sciences companies and healthcare providers, whether it's delivering education, whether it's kind of partnering with them to deliver more direct to home as well as virtual services to the patient. And the last thing really is pharma to pharma. For the first time, really, a company like a GlaxoSmithKline along with a Sanofi have come together to co-develop a vaccine. At a very high level, if I had to say, pharma, healthcare typically has not had a very stellar reputation. It's had a trust deficit with the public in general. But if I had to look at the last 5 months, I would say this has been among their finest hours.
Well, there has been a lot of criticism about the pricing of COVID care. And, there's been, in fact, a lot of anxiety about that. But, we don't have space to go into that. But what is very interesting is that because of the anticipation of the COVID vaccine, there's a lot of attention now on clinical trials. What do you think has been the learnings from this entire experience around COVID? What can accelerate drug development in the future?
That's the other big thing where there's been huge impact. For the first time, I guess the public at large has really become aware of what it takes to bring a drug or a vaccine to market. Otherwise, in lay conversations, it's like, oh, the vaccine is going to come out by independent state. Guess what? It's not. The point is that it's a very structured, fairly rigorous, regulated process by which you collect data, whether it's safety data, toxicology data, efficacy, et cetera, and you've got to go through different phases. I think a lot of the public at large has now become a little more aware about that. But there's always been this challenge to the industry over the last several years to say, how can we bring down the time for these trials and how do we make them more cost effective? More importantly, how do we increase the probability of success? Because when we think about the cost of bringing a drug to the market, it includes the cost of all the failures. And therefore, if you think about a new product, it costs more than $2 to $2.5 billion to bring the product to market. So where we think that there might be a possibility of being able to impact this in developed countries, over the last 10 to 15 years, there's been this constant move towards making more and more patient data electronic. Now, there's still a lot to be done in terms of making sure that different databases talk to one another. But given that, if there is so much data that is available, that data becomes analyzable, computable, and more importantly, you can start finding cohorts or clusters of patients who may demonstrate certain attributes or characteristics. If I could do that and look retrospectively and longitudinally at the data, then I can decide that a person is probably likely to respond to this treatment, but this other person has a pre-existing condition which is not likely to respond to this treatment. And therefore, I would design my clinical trial protocols appropriately. I would select my patients based on historical data. And then over time, what may end up happening is with more and more wearables, as well as the ability to kind of have home appliances for healthcare, you might be able to take more and more of these trials off-site into the patient's home and be able to kind of collect data more dynamically, and more, shall I say, with a higher probability of success. So that's really where we think clinical trials are going.
Thank you very, very much, Sanjay, for joining me. And, the good thing that's come out of all this is that finally there's white-hot focus on health issues. And one hopes that a lot of productive things will come out of the collective damage that the world has gone through. So thank you.